Hello and welcome to Boardgame Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears, and under the Meeple lights today we have Sarah Shave from Board Games in a Minute. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. And why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a board gamer. I live in upstate New York, in the Finger Lakes region. I am a practicing attorney by day and a board gamer by night. And during the pandemic, I started a YouTube channel called Board Games in a Minute, where I do 1 minute overviews of board games.
Fantastic. So let's just explain what this format is all about. For those who are new, perhaps just clicked on this video, and this is actually our last episode of season one. So I'm super excited to see what the final 10 questions are. So we'll be presenting 10 questions to our guests. However, there is a twist. Our guest has no idea what the questions will be, and we have no idea which questions will be coming out because my memory is not that great from 120 questions. So our questions will be drawn from this bowl. So if you've been watching, you'll be familiar with that, and it'll be random questions. Now, when we're finished with those, we'll come to the end of our season, and then in due time, we'll bring in season two with 120 completely new questions. So, will our guests thrive under the Meeple lights, or will they be a little bit nervous? We're about to find out as we present 10 questions to our guests. So, Sarah, are we ready?
Yes, I am ready.
So, let's dive into question one.
Sure.
So, do you have a core philosophy in how you live your life? So that's quite an interesting question about you personally. So,
Yeah, my core philosophy is to treat others how I would want to be treated. I think that's the most important thing, and I try to live by that in everything that I do. I think about how would I feel if the roles were reversed. So yeah, I believe that's called the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. So in everything I do, I try to live by that rule.
yeah, and it also shows in the values of how we live a life in general as well, isn't it? And I know you do some fantastic things outside the board game community as well. I don't know if you'd like to explain what you do, because you do some wonderful
Yes.
stuff.
Sure. So for a living, I'm a legal aid attorney. So we are a nonprofit organization and we provide legal services to those who cannot afford legal counsel. So primarily, I help people who are about to be evicted or lose their housing benefits. So I work to keep a roof over people's heads. And then aside from that, I'm a huge animal rights activist. So I've volunteered at an elephant sanctuary twice. When I was in law school, I was the president of the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund chapter of my law school. So I try to educate people about, animal issues and about how animals should not be exploited, especially wild animals, that they should not be used for entertainment, which a lot of them are, or kept as pets. So I do work in that kind of area as well on the side. And the board game that I'm trying to design is about rescuing elephants, in fact.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. The cause and dedication that goes into that. So yeah, I'm sure you should be super proud of that. So
Oh,
thank you for
thank you.
sharing.
Thank
So
you.
let's move on to
Yeah,
question two.
sure.
So, what got you into board gaming?
Yeah, so I actually I mean, when I was little, of course, I played like the classics like Monopoly, Life, and those kinds of games. But it's when I was in law school that my law school friends introduced me to Catan, and I had never played Catan before then, and I was hooked immediately, and I wanted to play like every weekend. I think we played a total of maybe 3 times, and then they were done. They're like, no more, and I would just beg and beg to play more and more, but they didn't want to. So then after law school, I moved to London for a couple of years, and when I was living in London, I discovered that there's a meetup called London on Board. And that's when I started attending this meetup and learned that there's this whole big world of board games that I just did not even know existed. And that's when I really learned about modern board gaming. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite funny how people get into gaming through, there's so many different stories out there, and I'm sure many of us have started off with the classics, your Monopoly and Game Clue and games like that, and then it's not until we actually get into kind of gaming groups we realize actually there's a whole range of board games out there for different tastes, aren't they, and different people.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So let's move on to question three.
Sure.
So we've had some easy ones to start with, and
Those
let's see if we
easy,
get any
yes.
tough ones. So, what are your thoughts on apps being used in board games?
Yeah, I think if it's an app that allows you to maybe score easier than on a notepad or something like that, I think it's fine. But board games that use app as a major part of the game itself, then I think that's going away from the medium, in fact. Like, then it's not essentially just a board game. Now you're requiring people to have an app on their phone. And so, um, I'm sure that there are people who are fine with that, but I personally would not want to I don't play many board games like that. I think the only board game that I enjoy that uses an app is the planet game, the deduction game. I got what's it called?
Planet X, is it? Or
Yes,
just
Search for Planet X. That's right. So I think that's the only game I have played that uses an app, and I think that's fine because of the nature of the game. Because there's just so many different possible, you know, scenario like games that they want to create. So you kind of need a computer behind that, I suppose. But typically, I'm not a huge fan of using an app in board games. Like I just want it to be a completely like non-digital experience. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you on that. And my partner was saying quite old school, and I just want to play the game on a board game. I do not
Yes.
want to be using technology to be taking me through an experience. For me, I think that takes you away. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't mind that and using apps. And there are some apps that do benefit games, but I'm more of if I see a game using an app, I'm not interested. I think I'll stick with there's plenty of games out there that don't use apps, and I'm all for that experience of enjoying myself playing the board game, not using technology.
Yeah, I prefer not using technology if I can. Yeah.
Be interesting to see what other people think. So if you're at home watching this and think a little bit differently, perhaps you love games that utilize apps, and there are some fantastic games out there that do, then let us know in the comments down below what some of your favorites are. It'll be interesting to see whether you can change your minds. Well, you'll struggle with that, but give it a go. Let us know some games. So let's move on to question 4. So, can you name 3 board games you would love to see second editions for? So, perhaps the games that haven't quite been re-released or perhaps haven't had an update.
Wow, that's a tough one. And it's a funny question because I actually just asked that on my weekly YouTube series. Like I have a weekly YouTube series where I end it with a question, and I actually pose that question in my most recent video to my watchers, and I actually could not come up with something on the spot. That is really hard. I know this is kind of cheating because I know that there is a new edition coming out of this game, but it's a game that I really love, which is Bruxelles 1893. So I know it's kind of cheating because I know that there is a new edition in the works that will be coming out soon with updated artwork and stuff. And an expansion as well. But aside from that, oh my God, that's a really tough question. Wow.
Any
Because,
classics?
I don't know because I got into the hobby more recently than others. Like I started maybe like I guess you could say I started hobby board gaming in around 2012 or so. So, and then there just aren't so many old games that I know. I guess, I could say something like maybe this again is cheating. I know that there is a new edition of this game, but like Witch's Brew, I know was kind of re-implemented into Broom Service, but maybe an updated edition of Witch's Brew with like maybe some more cool artwork. I don't know. It's really hard. I can't
I
think
tell
of.
you one. I tell you one that I would love to see come out is Pillars of the Earth. I know they've brought out through the book series, 2 of the versions, but I'd love to see the original Pillars of the Earth that should be revamped, and I'm sure they could do a lot more to make some subtle improvements. I love the game. I think it's a great streamlined
Ooh.
game.
Ooh, what about Five Tribes? Okay, I know Five Tribes isn't that old and it's a great game and I absolutely love Five Tribes, but maybe what if they came out with a new edition that was more, I don't know, like with different artwork or something like that? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I love games that perhaps don't change it too much, don't sway too much from the original, but give you enough to give you that excitement and, oh, there's something new here, but it's not swaying too much away from the original.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want it to sway from the original, especially Five Tribes. Like I think that there are some expansions which are actually out of print and some promo cards, like some special genie cards and such. So if they came out with like a brand new edition of it with like updated like maybe meeples, like screen printed meeples or something for all the different tribes, maybe they could introduce like a big box edition of it that includes all the expansions and all of the genies because I've been on the hunt for some of the genies that I have not been able to get my hands on. Yeah.
Well, there we have it. So hopefully they're watching this and might do something. So
Yeah,
let's move on to our next question, number 5.
sure.
Yeah, that was a tough one. That was a
That
tricky
was a
one.
tough one.
So, how competitive are you in board games, or do you just play for fun?
I am very competitive, but I'm not a sore loser. So I'm not a sore loser and I'm not an obnoxious winner. Like I've played with people who are both sore losers and very obnoxious winners. Like just to tell you a story, I recently played a game like a couple of months ago where I lost, like, I lost the game and I accepted my defeat. It was fine. And after the game was put away, the winner then says to me, I think you actually scored incorrectly and you should have scored lower than you did. And I'm like, I already lost and the game was put away, and now you're telling me that I scored incorrectly and my score should have been lower. I'm like, just accept your victory. Like you already won. Like be happy you won. Like why are you trying to make me feel even worse now about having lost? So if I win a game, I don't rub it in people's faces. I just take my victory and I'm like, oh, that's really nice because I hardly ever win board games. I tend to lose most of the time. So if I were a sore loser, this is not a hobby I would be able to enjoy because I lose the vast majority of games I play. So I'm able to accept defeat and that's perfectly fine because for me it's about the experience. It's about having fun with the people I'm playing with. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
absolutely. And that's what, yes, and that's what board gaming does, doesn't it? It brings people together, and that social aspect is so important. And I've got a couple of friends who are very competitive at board gaming. I don't think I've beaten yet, and I'm kind of like swaying on the side of I want to enjoy the experience, and I think sometimes if it becomes too competitive, I can feel that sometimes my brain goes into a mathematical sense of working out every probability, and that takes the enjoyment away because the experience should be enjoyable, not become a mathematical problem when you're playing a game.
I agree. I also agree that like, I'm competitive because I also think it brings enjoyment to the game. Like if I played games with people who just didn't even care what they were doing, then I think that would also be a bit problematic in the on the other end because like I want people to try to win so that there is some kind of competition. I don't want to just take actions just for the sake of taking actions and just like, just not even pay attention to what I'm doing. So I think it's important for people to want to try to win but understand that winning is not the end goal. Like, so, I still want the competition, but I don't want it to be the end goal winning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't chuck your teddies out the pram if you lose. Absolutely, enjoy the experience. So
Yes.
we'll move on to our next question, number 6.
Sure. Halfway done.
So we're getting there. We're doing well. So, what inspired you to choose the career path you're on? So, I suppose you've got two paths, haven't you? An attorney and also the board gaming. So, why don't you talk about both?
Sure. So first I'll talk about being an attorney. So I actually kind of ended up here in a not so straightforward way. So my parents, they're from Asia, and like many Asian parents, they wanted all their kids to become doctors. And so I excelled in math and science in high school, but because I was a bit rebellious, I didn't want to just become a doctor just because my parents wanted me to. So when I was in university, I decided to choose a course of study that had nothing to do with medicine or science or math. So I ended up choosing business as a major. And then I realized I did not enjoy it at all. And then I decided, that something I really do enjoy is so I ended up going to graduate school to get a PhD in Middle Eastern studies. But then I realized in my third year of graduate school that getting a tenure track position as a professor at a prestigious university is just going to be very difficult. And I guess I didn't feel like I was cut out for that kind of academic life and trying to pursue a career as a professor at a university in a city that I would actually want to live in. So I decided after 3 years into the program that I would leave with just my master's degree. So now I have a degree in business, which I didn't want to work in, and a master's degree in Middle Eastern studies. And I'm like, what can I do with this? So then the next logical step seemed to be law school. So I was like, okay, I really enjoy Middle Eastern studies. Maybe I can go to law school and work in human rights or international law. So then I ended up going to law school, but unfortunately, I did not end up in international law or, human rights on a broad global scale, because then life led me to London for a few years because of a relationship. But then I came back, and then of course, I'm a lawyer now. So I ended up, taking the bar exam after moving back from London to the US, and just taking whatever job I could find. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now. I have always had an interest in public interest law, though. So it's always been important to me to have a job in which I feel like I'm making a difference in the world, and so that I can sleep easily at night. Like, it's really important for me to be able to sleep at night knowing that I help to make the world a better place, not a worse place. As far as board gaming, so I started my board gaming channel during COVID, and I started it as a way to stay connected to board games when the world was in lockdown. So, it's a little nice side job. It's not something I will ever pursue as a full-time career because I think it's a very volatile industry with, there's always just so much drama in the industry. I don't think it's something that I would ever want my full livelihood to be dependent on. So it's just a side thing for me, and it's fun, and I'm going to keep on doing it for as long as it's fun. But I think if I turned it into a career, it might even lose some of its funness. So I don't ever intend on turning it into a full-time career.
Yeah, that's great. And it's a good point, isn't it? Because a lot of people, especially young kids these days, who want to become the next YouTube star and whatever it might be, whether it was it Mr. Beast to keep watching, and my
Yeah.
children keep reminding me, okay, watch this Mr. Beast video, or whether it's the next kind of board game review or whatever it might be, they want to be the next thing, and it's so competitive, and
Yeah.
I think to even make a paid career from it is very far and few between. And I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
you're right as well in that you've got to enjoy it. And sometimes when you step into business, that enjoyment can go away.
Yes, definitely.
So it's striking that balance, isn't it? But thank you so much for sharing that. That's fantastic. And I hope your experience in London was enjoyable as well, and you had a fun time there.
It was. I really love London.
Great. Fantastic. So let's move on to our next question, number 7. So making it much easier getting them at the ball now. So, what are your thoughts on the cost of shipping? So, at the moment in the board game industry, didn't we? The shipping was astronomical, and I think it's starting to settle a bit, but it's still quite high. So, what are your thoughts?
I mean, my thoughts are that I don't like high shipping costs. As someone who backs, a lot of Kickstarters, it's really painful to see the cost of shipping getting a lot higher and higher, and it hasn't gone down. Like, I understand when the world was in lockdown, and resources were, limited, and so shipping costs increased a lot. But even now that the world is open again, shipping costs haven't decreased because, like, why would they? You know what I mean? I'm not an expert on freight logistics or anything like that, but it's definitely caused me to back fewer games than ever before because, like, I try to look at the value of what I think the board game is and then how much they think that they'll be charging for shipping. And it's also a risk because a lot of campaigns now will say that this is just an estimate and you could be surprised with a huge number later on. So I'm trying not to, I've never been someone who's into really huge box games anyway, but I would never back one of those, I think, because the shipping cost, I think, will be astronomical for a game like that. And if it's a game that's going to come to retail, then I think I'll try to wait until it's at retail at my local game store because, I definitely want to avoid paying those shipping costs if I can. But at the same time, I understand that they need to get the games from where they're produced to where they're going to be played somehow, and shipping is a part of that. And yeah, I know that, margins are pretty slim for a lot of small publishers. So I understand that they have to charge shipping. But as someone who is tight on money, like many people, I am starting to back fewer games because of it.
Yeah, I'd say I'm on the same side because I backed quite a lot of Kickstarter games and the shipping costs were absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
And yeah, I understand that's the way the industry is, fine. But I've now got the point where why would I be paying that much for a game on crowdfunding when I can just wait till come out to retail? And I've now found that yes, you'll get perks on crowdfunding, of course you will. But sometimes retailers will get the Kickstarter version anyway. So why am I paying the astronomical shipping costs when I can just wait to come out to retail?
exactly. Yeah,
So yes, and certainly money is a big factor in life these days.
it is.
But
Yes,
we'll see how it goes. Hope fingers crossed. Some prices have got to come down at some point eventually. So we'll see how it goes in the future. So
that's
let's move on to our next question, Sarah. So we're on to number 8, and to the last three. So, what's the most frustrating thing for you in board games?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. The most frustrating thing for me is when I feel like the rule book is not written well. As someone who has professional editing experience and has offered editorial services to publishers, when I get a rule book that is very poorly written, filled with inconsistencies and grammatical errors, as well as just being poorly written, like sections, being misplaced and not in the kind of order that it should be in, I just find that incredibly frustrating. I think as an attorney, I kind of have more of a sense of how things should be laid out when I'm reading a rule book. And, I just come across so many rule books that are just so badly written. And it's just really painful to see. When you're trying to learn a game, you want it to be as easy as possible, the learning experience. And some rule books just do not make that easy for you. Yeah.
Yes, I've certainly fallen into that, and I'm just looking. I think it's Castaways, which I really like the game, but the rule book is tough to get through, and there's these important rules that are kind of mashed in with other paragraphs, and I think just put that in a box, please. That's an important rule. So what I decided, because it took me 4.5 hours to get through that rule book, I actually put a cheat sheet together. I go, I'm not reading that rule book again. I'm going to create my own little rule set. So when I pick it back up, I'm reading that rule set.
Yeah, I mean, we as gamers should not have to go to the BGG forums to ask for clarifications on so many rules in one game. And I recently just played a game where I feel like we were referring to BGG for every other turn that someone took. And I was like, this rule book just was not well written. And the game, the manufacturer, the publisher really should have done a better job. And they're a big publisher, like they have the resources that they could have done a much better job on that rule book. So that was really disappointing.
Yes, and I put it down to laziness. There's my optimal output. So let's move on to our next question. We're on to number 9, the last two. Okay. So, who's been the most influential person in your career?
Wow. Oh gosh, that's a really good question. In my career. This is terrible because I actually don't remember his name now, but I watched this documentary one time in law school and it just inspired me so much. There was this attorney. Um, I cannot actually, sorry, if you give me 1 second, I can look up his name because I actually
Go
have
for
him
it.
quoted. I have him quoted in my Facebook profile. So I just need to read you the quote and I will remember what it is. So yeah, oh, do they not have the quote section in Facebook profiles anymore? I guess I cannot see it because I think they took that part away. Oh gosh, I don't remember this attorney's name, but he was a really famous like human rights attorney, and he had a really good quote along the lines of something like, a lot of the human rights violations that take place are done by people in power. Like they're the ones who have the ability to inflict suffering on like other people. So if you want to eliminate these human rights abuses and such, you need to really look at the people in power who are implementing all of these things. And he talked about how all these things in the past were legal, like slavery was legal, like the Holocaust when that happened was legal, in Germany. So all these things these atrocious things that happened throughout human history were legal at the time. And why? Because the people in power allowed them to become legal. So, he is someone who would try to fight against the people in power and try to make things more equitable and fight for human rights, and his speech was just so inspiring. I just cannot remember his name at the moment, which is such a shame. I feel like my memory has gone really bad. But whoever that attorney was, I don't remember his name, but he was just really, really inspiring. Yeah. I think his
Well, it
name
seems
became
like,
his
yeah,
last name.
it certainly sounds like an amazing person indeed. And I'm sure what we'll do, we'll put the link in the description down below so people can check that out.
Sure.
I think that'll be certainly great insight, and it certainly seems someone you're fond of. So thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's move on. I was going to say before we move on, that's probably a concept I think we see with everything around the world these days in terms of someone in power. And there is actually a theory out there, and there's certainly research has been done to show that those in power actually abuse that power and take that too far, which we've seen, unfortunately, in the modern day.
Yeah, we see it time and time again. People in power just get corrupted by power, and yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thankfully, we've got our feet in the ground. So let's move on to our final question. So we've got a
Yes.
choice of two here. Let's see which one comes out. So, are there any big board game fans in the family?
Besides me, maybe my little sister, she is more willing to play board games with me than anyone else in the family. So my mom, I've gotten my mom to play a couple board games. So she really loves the games Azul and Porto. So she gets really competitive and really happy when she wins. So I know that board games are a good way to keep one's mind active. So as one is getting older, it's a good way to try to stave off dementia. So I try to encourage my mom to play board games as she's, in her older age, because I want to keep her mind active. So I get really happy when she's willing to play a board game with me. But generally speaking, no one is as big into board games as I am, but they will be willing to play if if I can convince them. Like around the holidays and stuff, I'll usually bring out a family game of some kind and we'll play that. And, everyone's usually down for Azul or Porto. Yeah.
Fantastic. And there was actually a recent TED talk on board games and how it can help with reducing the likelihood of dementia. It's
Yeah,
not a cure, but it helps with the brain, and it also
exactly.
helps. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. So we'll put that link in the description down below so people can check that out.
Yeah,
So
that's
that
exactly what I was referring to. Yeah.
yeah, so it's certainly worth a check out. So that brings us to the end of season one. So we hope you've enjoyed this. I'd like to thank our guest Sarah for participating, and we hope you really enjoyed all the videos from this season. And we hope you'll enjoy season two when it comes along as well. And like always, we'd love to hear from you. So please leave a comment down below and your thoughts on today's show, any particular highlights. And also, we'd love to hear from you and any improvements we can make on this show. And that brings us right to the end. So thank you once again. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'd like to see more videos like this, and hit that like button as well. So that brings us to the end. Until next time, we'll see you in season two. Bye now.
Bye.